going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams here with The Distance. I got a video for you guys. Response to the Awoken Mind. Climb the African American boxer. Um, those who have followed my channel for the longest time know that, I'm pretty much just a true historian of the sport. I'm just going to give, my opinion and my own details on what the Awoken Mind said. Basically, he was talking about maybe a possible decline in the sport with a certain ethnic culture of boxing. I'm just gonna give my little 2 cents on it, and also bring up little other aspects and other points. The Awoken Minds video, and by no means was I even offended by the video. I just thought it was an interesting topic that he discussed. I'm partially African American, or mostly African American. I'm not telling the other part I have in me, but overall, it was a very interesting topic. How that there kind of a lack of African American fighters that are champions and stuff like that. Now, personally, I think that I don't believe that there's a decline in the sport with African American fighters. I don't think that there's a decline in the sport because boxing is a global sport. And due to the fact it's a global sport now, a lot of the channels and the networks are starting to pick up on fighters from other countries, fighters with like a certain story to them. People in the 80s loved Mike Tyson at first. When he was 20 years old, won the championship, beat Trevor Berbick November of 1986, and won the WBC championship from Berbick. Knocked him out in like 2 rounds. People listen to that kind of that heartfelt story, and you could do nothing but just love Mike Tyson because he's going out and he's living kind of just in a way the American dream. Muhammad Ali, country boy from Kentucky, went out, won I believe a gold medal at the Olympics in 1960. Went on to become a transcendent figure in the sport of boxing. And even other fighters, Roberto Duran, another fighter with an interesting story going on, becoming perhaps the greatest lightweight of all time. Fighters from the Great Depression, such as the fighters who grew up in the Great Depression, such as the Billy Conns, the Joe Lewises, the Sugar Ray Robinsons, Jake LaMotta's. All these fighters coming up and having a fight, after the Great Depression. And a lot of people believe that the Great Depression only impacted the United States, but the Great Depression had an impact on, other countries, just because now, along with World War II, there wasn't a trade route. So, and America boxing was a huge sport, and, we had, another beloved figure, Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey, white fighter who basically was poor growing up. Grew up from like a low middle class to poor environment growing up, to come in, becoming, at the time, one of the richest boxers in history. I think what's going on is that I think that people are picking up from fighters from other nations who don't, because there's a lot of guys who were probably middle class growing up, and I guess don't find their stories to be interesting. I think really networks are interested in the story behind the fighter, because they believe the story will lead to that hunger and that drive. If I look at it like this, something that boxing is missing right now is that just dominant figure. Just that fire and I hate to say this, but when a fighter becomes undefeated, sometimes, if they say they lose one fight, sometimes bad for that fighter, depending on what promotional company they're with. Because sometimes fighters get thrown to the garbage after losing one fight. Let's say a fighter loses two or three, and say they lose two or three back to back. Sometimes they just become gatekeepers automatically. Um, but I just think that a lot of the boxing scene, a lot of the boxing public is more interested in boxers who have a story. Kind of come from either like a poor background to where they had to fight, like similar to Manny Pacquiao. Had a poor background and fought at a young age, and went from lowest of the low to one of the highest of the high. And a lot of people, and yeah, I don't understand why a lot of people don't like Manny Pacquiao. That's just my opinion. I like Pacquiao. I don't have a problem with Pacquiao. Um, he's really one of those fighters that we actually need in the sport right now. Whether he fights at catch weights or no catch weights, he's a fighter that we need right now. And say he fights, Timothy Bradley. If he fights Timothy Bradley, then that's a pretty good fight. He's giving the younger fighter an opportunity. That fight, if Bradley doesn't sign at top rank, more than likely is never going to happen. But like I said, Pacquiao's a fighter that we need right now. Sergio Martinez is another fighter with a story. Sergio Martinez, didn't even get into a boxing gym until he was in his 20s. And overall gets better with each and every fight. Um, he's another fighter that boxing kind of needs right now. Kelly Pavlik was a fighter when they marketed him who had a story, had a unique story behind him. He was a poor kid from Youngstown, Ohio. So it just goes on and on. It's to be honest, unless you're extremely good looking and a model and shit, it's hard to market you. It's hard to market a fighter like that unless you're a fighter that goes through adversity. And now, we see second generation boxers, and the only story they have behind them is their fathers were good fighters, and alright, I'm a fighter too. Or and sometimes there's the second generation boxers that have nothing, and then they come to something. Like Mayweather. Mayweather was second generation that came from nothing and became something huge in the sport. Something that will always strike me is how a lot of these fighters don't have crowd pleasing styles, and they just don't get any. Nobody really notices them from time to time. Nobody wants to notice them because they don't have quote unquote crowd pleasing styles, and that's something else to look at. There's a lot of African American boxers that are just slick fighters, slick counter punchers, or just have styles that I guess they say stink out the joints, stink out buildings, make people fall asleep. And don't get me wrong, I've had fights that made me want to go to hell to sleep, but with I guess with young prospect fighters, I think the problem is they fight down to the level of their opposition. And I can go on and on, about a quote unquote decline of African American boxers, but I just think that since boxing is a global sport, more people are more interested in other fighters. They're more interested in the fighters from Ukraine, the fighters from UK or Canada or sometimes United States or the Philippines. A lot of boxers are just, a lot of people are just interested in the story behind the boxer, because there's people out there that believe the story behind the boxer is what translates into what you see in the ring, unfortunately. So I don't see much of a decline of the African American boxer, just because boxing is a global sport. Even if there's a lack of African American boxers that are champions, or excuse me, titleists, I just don't see a decline in that ethnic culture because boxing, I just think that boxing is, I think what's going on is boxing is more diverse than it was 15, 20 years ago. Hell, 30 years ago. Boxing is more diverse. Now fighters from other countries are getting opportunities. Now a lot of boxers are, traveling to other countries. Um, Sometimes they're signed with other promotions to get more money. Promotions overseas to get more money. So I just don't see the decline of of African American boxers. I just see boxing diversity increasing, and as diversity increases, you see just more and more different ethnicities and different backgrounds, translated into the sport, and that's what and I just think that's what it is. So anyway, guys. Oh yeah, and by the way, and before I get off the video, um, a few weeks ago there was talk about blacks not liking Manny Pacquiao and stuff, and I just think that a lot of people have their own preconceptions of Manny Pacquiao, whether he's Filipino or not, whether he's a black fighter, white, Japanese, Canadian. I just think that there's always going to be those people that just have their preconceptions of Manny Pacquiao, whether it be because of the fans or not. I choose myself personally not to call Pacquiao fans Pactards. And the same way I just don't call Floyd Mayweather fans Flomos. That's just me, and that's just that's pretty much out of respect. But I just think that there's a lot of people that have their own preconceptions of Manny Pacquiao, the same way that there's people that have preconceptions of Floyd Mayweather, the same way that people have preconceptions of Sergio Martinez or other fighters out there. So really, I don't even think it's just a race that doesn't like Manny Pacquiao, because there's really not many of us African Americans anyway. But I could see where a lot of people are going with these videos and stuff. But I'm staying out of the shit. You're not gonna hear Julian Williams going back and forth with somebody else about that. But me, I personally like Pacquiao. I like watching him fight, and most of y'all like watching him fight too, or want to see him lose, because either way, you guys are still putting money in Aram's pocket. Either way, so it is what it is. Anyway, guys, that was the distance. Thanks for watching. Peace.